The new theater of the mind. The Bruce Collins Show.
And welcome back to the Bruce Collins Show. We're very glad to have you join us. Tonight, we have Father Mike Driscoll talking with us about his new book on Catholic exorcists. And we have a young man who came to us to report what he found inside a pharmaceutical company that he worked in. For the purposes of his anonymity, we have disguised his voice. The Bruce Collins Show airs every Friday night at midnight right here at WWPR 1490 AM. You can listen to past archives of the Bruce Collins Show at ipbn-fm.com. That's ipbn-fm.com. There's a banner just for the Bruce Collins Show on the Intrepid Paradigm Broadcasting Network website. Click on the show banner and you will go right to our page. We would appreciate it if you're able to spread the word for our show by word of mouth, social media, or in whatever creative way you can. Also, we have a Facebook page for the Bruce Collins Show. Please like us there. And you can email the show at bruce_collins_show@AOL.com. The Bruce Collins Show also has a YouTube channel. Visit YouTube, search for the Bruce Collins Show channel, subscribe, and catch all the latest shows on YouTube. And now let me introduce my co-host, Chad Miles. He's a former congressional candidate in Michigan. In fact, one of his slogans was, his brain is so sharp, it'll cut government deficits. And he's a military veteran and is the founder and is the webmaster at Conspiria.net. You can also find out more information on Chad at chadmiles.com. He's radio's lethal weapon, Chad the Odometer Miles. Welcome back to the program, Chad.
Hey, Bruce. It's good to be here. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Another great Friday night with our friends here on WWPR 1490 AM and also right here at ipbn-fm.com.
That's right.
What have you been up to lately, Chad?
Oh, I got the weird feeling that the NSA is spying on our show.
Well, that is strange. Why would you say that?
I don't know, just a strange feeling that I have.
Now, I understand that you've been doing some research behind the scenes. Do you think that's what has made you so paranoid?
I don't think so. And yes, you are right. I've been doing some undercover research, and I'm going to divulge my findings about an underground base next time on the show.
Well, wow. Wait a minute. You mean you found an underground base and you're going to tell us about it?
Yeah, that's right. And I think people are going to be shocked at what I reveal next time.
Wow. If only I had a time machine, I could fast forward to next time and find out what the shocking information you have about underground bases is, and then I could come back right now and tell everybody about it. But then I guess I better just let you talk about it.
Yeah, well, you're just going to have to wait until next time like everybody else.
Maybe the NSA is following you.
Well, Senior Pickles was followed home from a dog obedience school by a cat in black.
Huh. I seem to remember a scenario like that, a movie by the name of Cats and Dogs. Anyway, you say it was a cat in black?
Yeah, that's right.
I don't think I can stand to know any more about Senior Pickles this week, quite frankly. Do you have any news for us, Chad?
Well, as a matter of fact, I do.
Excellent.
Unison Spa House in Hakone, Japan recently began offering guests supposedly soothing skin conditioning baths of ramen noodles.
Yummy.
Elevating the health status of what might be Japan's real national dish. The pork broth that fills the tub is genuine, but because of health department regulations, only synthetic noodles can be used. Then it's not really ramen noodles, is it?
No.
And it's not clear that the artificial ramen achieves the same, allegedly, beautiful collagen levels as actual noodles.
Huh.
That's a real story from the Metro News in London.
So if you want to sit in pork broth, go to Japan.
I pronounce it ramen. Is that the way you pronounce it? I've heard other people with different pronunciations of that word.
No, I pronounce it ramen also.
I've heard ramen.
Yeah.
Before. I say ramen.
What they ought to do is make it like a giant styrofoam bathtub and put a cup of soup on the outside, and then have people get inside it.
Like a hot tub.
Yeah, and then stir it while they're sitting there.
Excuse me while I stir your bath.
Yeah.
The federal Medicare, this is probably my favorite story this week out of all the stories. The federal Medicare fraud strike force obtained indictments of 243 people in June in a variety of alleged scams and swindles, and among those arrested was Dr. Noble U. Azukanma, 56, of Fort Worth, Texas, who once billed the government for working 205 hours in a single day.
Wow.
October 16th, 2012. That was the day he billed 205 hours. Other indictees were similarly accused of inflating the work they supposedly did for Medicare patients, but Dr. Izukanma clearly had the most productive day of the bunch.
Yeah.
That's from the Dallas Morning News.
How did that initially get by them?
That's so funny.
On October 16th, this gentleman had 205 hours.
That's hilarious. That cracks me up. He's super productive.
He is.
Republican presidential contender Carly Fiorina, who with her husband earned $2.5 million last year, disclosed that the U.S. tax system required her to file not just a federal return, but returns in 17 states as well. And a June New York Times report chose one state, Michigan, of course, to highlight the Fiorina's plight. Ultimately, the Fiorinas, that's such a squirrely name.
Yeah.
The Fiorinas determined that they owed Michigan income tax of $40. But they had no way of knowing the exact amount until they had completed 58 pages of documents to rule out various Michigan attempts to collect more because the tax they owed was more justly payable to other states and could be thus excluded.
Wow.
And that's from the New York Times.
And you know, what's weird is the $40 that they owed in Michigan was very suspect because what happened was John Conyers showed up at their door with an open wallet. He just said, put it right in here.
With a tin cup.
Yeah.
You know, I'm surprised that the Fiorinas only earned $2.5 million. That kind of struck me as odd. It seems like they would have made more than that, but
yeah, she made a lot
not.
more when she was CEO at HP, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So
I don't know
John Conyers knew they made a lot of money, so he...
Yeah, I really don't know what she and her husband are doing at the moment, so I don't know where that money's, coming from anyway. I know she ran for senator and lost, but...
I don't even know who her husband is, to be honest, so I'm not sure what he does for a living.
He probably would be Mr. Fiorina.
Mr. Fiorina.
No, his name is Mr. Uzukanma from the last article. That's how he made $2.5 million.
It's pronounced Fiorina, but it's spelled Uzukanma.
Yeah. He billed for a 205-hour day. That's how he made $2.5 million.
All right. Because the walkway in front of a Publix supermarket in Fort Lauderdale had seen its share of Girl Scout cookie sellers, Patrick Lanier apparently thought the venue a natural for his product. On June 4th, he plopped down a live 5-foot-long shark he had just captured.
How did he keep it from flailing around?
That's what I was wondering, too. Was it not like whipping people in the face with its tail? In the shin, when they walk by?
Girl Scout sharks.
Get your sharks. Shark that he had just captured, in which he hectored shoppers to buy.
I've never heard that term.
Hectored. That's an interesting word, isn't it?
I'd like to hector you to buy this.
That harkens back to Greek mythology, doesn't it?
Yeah, I've never heard of that term.
Hectored.
Like that.
Hectored shoppers to buy, asking $100.
Want to buy a shark for $100?
Yeah, right. Fresh shark here, $100.
It's still alive.
Watch your shins, sir. Watch your shins. And occasionally tossing buckets of water on it to keep it shimmering.
Oh man.
He had less success than the cookie peddlers.
You think?
And in short order, loaded it back into his truck, took it to an inlet, and released it. However, he did avoid the police because it is illegal to sell fish without a commercial license. True story from WSVN TV in Miami.
You want to buy some cookies or a shark?
Hey, fresh shark here, sir.
So if he released it, it was alive. There's so many questions to that story I now have.
Well,
like, how
was he there like
holding
5
it?
minutes? Because a shark has to swim
Yeah.
to stay alive, right? So the water goes over its gills.
Can you imagine coming out of the store and some guy's holding a shark, a 5-foot-long shark, and asking if you want to buy it? What am I going to do with it? Where would I put it?
This wasn't like a little shark. This thing was pretty big.
Yeah, what would I do with that?
And then was he run out by the the grocery store workers? Did they finally say, "Get out of here with your shark"?
24 Girl Scout girls chased him out of the parking lot.
Yeah, that's our spot, mister.
That's right.
Hit the bricks, Patrick.
That story is just so bizarre, though. And
It's
then
very strange.
And think of the setup. Okay, he had a 5-foot-long shark. I don't know how he's keeping this thing domesticated at this point, but he's also got buckets of water with him. So he, what did he do? Unload the truck? He's got this 5-foot shark and 10 buckets of water? I just can't picture this.
We might have to investigate this.
Yeah.
We might have to have this guy on the show for an interview.
Yeah, and the shark, and see how he felt.
That would be interesting. All right. Yeah. Final story. Marijuana, this one's pretty funny too.
Wait a minute. It says he avoided, I'm sorry to go back on the last story, but it says he avoided the police, but they know who it was. They named him.
Yeah, his name is here and everything.
So what? They must have caught up with him eventually, right?
Maybe he did an interview already.
Yeah.
That's funny. Okay. Maybe he was friends with these neck guys.
Wait, you got to know. I'm sorry, I'm stuck on this story for a second. You got to know if he'd have sold the first one for $100, he's going back to the ocean to catch another one to sell at the supermarket.
He would have been onto something, right? If he would have actually sold it.
You know what's next after that? eBay.
Live shark.
Was he selling it for food or as a pet? I don't know.
I've heard of shark fin soup. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I guess he didn't care what you did with it, just as long as he got his $100.
Yeah, he just wanted to sell it for $100.
And how did he catch it? Like, how do you catch a 5-foot shark?
Very carefully.
You have a butterfly net?
The story doesn't say. Maybe there was a liquor store close by. That's why he wanted to sell it for $100.
You know, I'm going to look up this guy, and I'm going to make a made-for-TV movie on his life, because I bet he's really interesting.
The Patrick Lanier story.
Yeah. Maybe this could be like Jaws 8, Patrick's Revenge.
And Lonnie Anderson as the shark.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm showing my age with that.
Yeah. Burt Reynolds as the man leaning against the cane. No, just kidding. Is he still alive?
I think so.
Okay, good.
Marijuana is purported to make some heavy users paranoid. And the January arrest of 2 alleged Bozeman, Montana.
Do we know anybody that lives in Bozeman?
Yeah, I think we do.
Someone we may have named a few times on the show.
Okay, let me start over. Marijuana is purported to make some heavy users paranoid. The January arrest of 2 alleged Bozeman, Montana men may have been a case in point. Passers-by had reported the 2 men pacing along the side of Golden Beauty Drive in Rexburg, Idaho.
So
and
first
when
of all,
approached
first of all, they started in Montana and somehow they ended up in Idaho.
Yeah, I noticed that shift too. So they're in Idaho now, pacing on the side of the road, and when approached by a car, they would throw their hands up until the vehicle passed.
So they thought they were getting arrested.
Either arrested or they thought somebody kicked a field goal.
Yeah, exactly.
When police finally arrived, one suspect shouted, "We give up. We know we're surrounded. The drugs are over there."
So all those
and it
people
turned
that
out to
drove
be
by,
20. They
thought
turned
were
out to have
cops.
20 pounds of marijuana.
So there's all those people that drove by, they thought they were cops.
Every one of them.
Oh, man.
Wow, they sure have a lot of undercover cops in Idaho.
It's a posse.
According to the Idaho Falls Post-Register, they were not surrounded, nor had they been followed by undercover officers, as the men claimed.
Oh.
And that's a true story from the Post-Register in Idaho from January.
Stupid criminals.
Stupid. We love stupid criminal stories.
That's right. But we don't love Senior Pickles. Oh.
What? Yeah, we do. I do. You need to change your attitude towards him, Bruce. He's a nice dog.
And with that in mind, up next is Father Mike Driscoll and a young man we call Pete in a moment. And joining me this week is Father Mike Driscoll. Father Mike Driscoll is a priest at the Diocese of Peoria, Illinois. He was ordained in 1992. He's been a pastor of several parishes and is currently serving as chaplain of St. Elizabeth's Medical Center in Ottawa, Illinois. He has a BA in economics from the University of Illinois, an MA in moral theology from Mount St. Mary's Seminary, and a PhD in counselor education and supervision from Regent University. Father Driscoll's book on mental disorders, demonic possession, and exorcism, which we will be talking about this week, is entitled Demons, Deliverance, and Discernment, Separating Fact from Fiction About the Spirit World, and that is published by Catholic Answers. His book of short stories, The Father Kapranika Mysteries, is published by Bezalel Books. I might have mispronounced that. He can be contacted through his website, peterinchains.org. Father Driscoll, welcome to the Bruce Collins Show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, your book starts out with the question, why do we need another book on demonic possession? So what makes your book unique?
I guess the way I saw it, most of the books on the topic are mostly describing what that looks like, what it looks, describing, giving examples of people possessed by demons, what that looks like, and some of what the Exorcist does. I tried to go kind of from start to finish. So there's one difference, going from and this is all from a Catholic point of view. A lot of Christians would share a lot of the beliefs, though. But what is a demon? What power does a demon have? And from there, what does it mean when a person is possessed by a demon, and what is the Catholic Church ritual, and who does it, and how? So that's one kind of difference, I guess, that I went through the whole process. The other is that my doctorate is actually called counselor education and supervision. So it's a lot of counseling, but it was also studying the counselors. What do they do, and how do they do it? So I kind of took that same eye toward exorcists. Why does an exorcist think that, or what makes him think this person's possessed or is demonic rather than mental health, or vice versa? Why does he think a certain person has got a mental problem and not a demon? So I kind of tried to look at exorcists with that same eye that I learned to look at counselors with.
Mm-hmm. Now, I come from the Protestant faith, but you and I believe in the same Savior. And so, but one thing I've noticed over the last several decades, and you probably have too, and see if you agree with this, is when I was a teenager, it was the 80s, and we had certain movies like Poltergeist that came out, and I remember kids my age saying, ooh, I got to see this movie. And I had no interest, and I knew quite frankly, if I'd have done it, my parents wouldn't have been too pleased at me. And so I never really was interested in those types of movies. So there was interest among certain people back then, obviously, and there probably always has been. You think this is ramping up, though? Because I can't turn on the television without seeing a television program about the occult or seeing a movie trailer about the occult. Is this my imagination, or do you think that this type of stuff is ramping up? And again, one of the things we can tie it into as far as current events is the Charlie phenomenon, which I know you've written about recently. Why do you think all of this stuff is popular, and what are your thoughts about it?
I guess on one hand, I think that somewhat goes up and down depending on what movies are popular at a certain point in time or whatever. Mm-hmm. I do think part of it, to use your example, which is a great example, you said your parents wouldn't have approved of it. I talked to ministers of other Christian denominations, and we a lot of us see declining numbers of people practicing Christian faith. You know, I see a lot of people without really any particular faith that they're practicing. They may believe in God, maybe even believe Jesus Christ is their Savior in some sense, but not making it part of their life. And so because of that, I think, to use you as an example, you said, well, my parents wouldn't have approved. Well, there may be more parents out there who don't mind, you know. Yeah. So I think that might be part of it.
So why do people become possessed? How does this happen?
The exorcists that I talk to kind of independently talk about a few different doors, sometimes, as they say. One would be messing with involvement in the occult, so whether going to a psychic or playing with a Ouija board or doing whatever kind of, any kind of attempting to contact the spirit world other than trying to contact God or his angels and saints, because, God and his angels and saints aren't going to talk through a street corner psychic for $10, Yeah. So if you're trying to contact spirit, in those kind of ways, you're going to get in touch with none at all, which I think is usually what happens, but once in a while you might get in touch with a bad spirit. So there's one opening, involvement with the occult. A second one, would be patterns of sin, is the way one exorcist put it. In other words, committing some serious sin, making a habit of it, and embracing it. Because a lot of us have a lot of sins, and we're trying to do better with them, by God's grace. Mm-hmm. But someone who's really doing something evil and embracing it, that can be an open door as well. And the third one, which seems unfair, but trauma and abuse, victims of trauma and abuse. And what one exorcist told me about that was that a person who's been through a lot like that, if they get stuck and holding on to the negative emotions, let's say hate and anger and fear and revenge, a demon may like that too. Mm-hmm. Important to keep in mind, in my opinion, demon possession is extremely rare. So someone might say, gosh, I know people doing all three of those things and they don't get possessed. That may be, lots of people probably drive drunk without getting in wrecks, but it's still a bad idea. And so from a Christian point of view, those things I just mentioned are bad ideas, even though most people doing them don't end up possessed. But put it the other way around, most people who are possessed probably did one of those three.
Yeah. I was raised in church. My grandfather was a Protestant pastor for 50 years. And so I find it interesting to be able to compare notes with you. But one of the things that I find in the Protestant church that is very distressing is there are certain fringe elements that try to convince churchgoers that they're possessed. And I actually think sometimes they bring them under bondage by doing that. Do you think that's possible, that you could become oppressed, say, maybe not possessed, because I'm not sure if a Christian can be, or maybe that's another good question. Can a Christian be possessed? And also, can someone bring you under oppression by, maybe convincing you that you're possessed?
The first question, Catholic exorcists would say yes. The Catholic faith would believe that that's possible. Mm-hmm. Again, as an exorcist said, a person doesn't wake up one morning possessed. They build a relationship with evil. Yeah. So we would say, gosh, it seems unlikely, if not impossible, that it's someone who's really living their faith. But someone who's been Christian and has fallen away and not really doing anything. Remember what Jesus said about he gave that parable about the person who fell away, and the demon came back to them with 7 worse ones. So even though it was kind of a parable, it might be kind of a warning too, that a Christian may be worse off if they're a Christian and then fallen away and really not practicing in any way. So you and I might differ on whether that makes them a Christian or not. But in any case, we may agree. Sounds like we might agree on. If someone's really practicing the Christian faith, how are they going to end up possessed? That seems, it seems pretty much impossible from my understanding of it. And I'm sorry. And your second question was about.
Well, I've seen these people that are they're sort of fringe Protestant, and they'll. I saw one guy, for instance, and you may have heard of this. It was a documentary on HBO called "In Satan's Name," and it's about 20 years old. And this one pastor had convinced like 20 people out of 50 people in his church that they had all been tortured by the same old man who didn't even live in that state. But he had convinced them all that they were products of some conspiracy, satanic ritual abuse. And I saw these people having real problems, and I wondered if you can actually bring somebody under some type of possession and oppression by creating some type of bondage scenario. Do you think that's possible?
Wow, maybe, but from what you're just describing there, I would now move over to the mental health realm. That if someone who is, first of all, susceptible to believing some, I mean, you and I sitting here, we're not going to believe someone who's telling us that.
Right.
But if you got someone who's susceptible to believing this person who's got some kind of, they look to for some kind of authority or whatever, and they end up believing that, I would be more concerned about what's going on with their mental health.
Yeah.
There was a time when there were, a lot of people claiming like satanic ritual abuse, a number of which turned out to be just absolutely false.
Yeah.
The problem is a few of those are true, and we don't want to just throw out all of them and say, well, therefore it never happens. No, unfortunately, just because some people kind of fell into what you're describing there, that doesn't mean it never happens. It just means to be careful. But yeah, I would worry more about the mental health of those persons. I would never want to be jumping to the conclusion that I work at a hospital with a inpatient mental health unit, and some people say that they're seeing demons or hearing demons or having repeated nightmares about demons. I would never, as a first thing, say, "Gosh, you know what? You're probably possessed. You probably got a demon in you. We better do something." That's the worst thing I could tell to a person who very likely might just have schizophrenia or something. So I certainly say, "Oh, well, why don't we say a prayer and that?" And I, being a Catholic priest, say, "Have holy water and do that."
Yeah.
And then I'm saying, "Okay, now how's it going with your counselor? How's it going with the doctor here? How's the group meeting? How are the group meetings?" So I want to cover both areas. Sure, I'll pray and give a blessing and sprinkle holy water, but I want them to address the mental health issues too.
I realize that a lot of movies today aren't based on fact. And in fact, the subtitle of your book is Separating Fact from Fiction About the Spirit World, because there is a lot of fiction and maybe a lot of unbiblical ideas out there. And movies certainly feed into that. There's a lot of supernatural movies, occultic movies, and maybe they're not getting it exactly right, but they're still spreading some kind of a message. Do you think that people, maybe, I've known people who had a weird obsession with horror movies and these type of movies. Would an exorcist kind of raise their eyebrow at somebody like that?
Yeah, I think so. Kind of, one exorcist was saying we have to be careful. He said if we shout too often and too loudly, "Don't see that movie," what's the effect going to be? People are going to make sure they go see the movie.
That's true.
So we kind of have to be careful about it. Maybe more just dismissive and ignoring certain things. I like occasional scary movie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like something gory. That doesn't settle well with me, with my faith. To see something that seems like gratuitous violence or something. But I don't mind a scary movie occasionally. Yeah, I don't think it would be good to be obsessed with, probably watching too much TV or movies of any kind.
Right.
The ones what I guess bothers me is when one of these movies will say based on a true story, and it's, what does that mean? That means there might have been one little incident that seemed true and the rest of it was all made up. I don't think I don't think that movie made that line, so you can go watch The Exorcist. And yeah, granted, it's very loosely based on a true story, but, kind of never mind that. If you're going to see The Exorcist, say, okay, I'm going to watch a made-up movie. And I would say the same things even with those that say based on a true story. I know that Exorcism of Emily Rose, reading the background on that, that was fairly accurate, but even there had one or two glaring, problems with it that were inaccurate.
Now, when I was raised in church, I was taught that demons were fallen angels. But since then, I've ran into people who say they're the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim from Genesis. And so there seems to be, at least in some Protestant circles, this back and forth about what are demons. What do the exorcists and what do you say are demons?
Catholic teaching has been unchanged that they're fallen angels. Yeah, that God created all angels good, and some of them pretty much immediately rebelled, and so we call them demons. They're still, or fallen angels. They're still technically angels. In other words, pure spirits without bodies. But as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, there are no neutral ones. Either they're very good, doing God's will, or they're very evil, completely in rebellion against God. So yeah, Catholics and I'm sure a lot of Christians agree. I to be honest, I wasn't too aware of. I vaguely heard something of what you just said, but no, we would definitely say fallen angels. There is some disagreement with Catholic exorcists as to whether a human soul from hell could be possessing a person. Like some would, one exorcist talking about in a book I read talking about, I think, like the Apostle Judas being being one of a number of demons possessing a person, and also the soul of the Apostle Judas. On the other hand, where do you get that from? Well, the demon tells you, well, demons lie, so be a little bit leery of that. Right. And in the Catholic rite of exorcism, it doesn't matter that much. You do demand their name, but you go through the ritual, and you don't have to get too caught up in the details. But it's a kind of an interesting question there, I guess.
Yeah. That's the way I've always seen it, is that demons are fallen angels. They rebelled against God, so are they working together, or do they actually operate separately? Because if they're so evil, wouldn't they sort of work against each other?
The exorcists pretty much agree that that when a person's possessed, they're usually groups of demons, so they must work together in some way. Yeah. Probably C.S. Lewis Screwtape Letters might, purely fiction, but it was a neat take on how they work together. A lot of backstabbing and distrust among them and whatever, but so maybe it's something like that, or it may just be simply the stronger ones are able to impose their will on the weaker ones, things like that. But that is, I find that interesting too, that the exorcists usually say that they usually seem to be a number of demons when a person gets possessed.
For those of us that have been raised in the Protestant part of Christianity, tell us about the rite of exorcism. What is this?
I won't go into the one that was just recently revised, and in fact, the English version of it is still the American bishops just sent it to Rome for approval. So we'll stick with the older one, which isn't going to be too much different. The older one was promulgated, as we say, in 1614. If you think about it historically, that's not too long after the printing press was invented. Mm-hmm. So in other words, it comes from an oral tradition and a handwritten tradition from centuries before that, and it's got a lot of psalms and gospel verses, so it's pretty much going back to the time of Christ and the gospels and that, and was passed on, like I said, verbally and maybe handwritten, and then after the invention of the printing press, a number of church rituals were printed, and so 1614 the rite of exorcism was. It is a priest, only a priest is supposed to use it, and only a priest with the permission of his bishop. So I am not an exorcist. I like to say that right out front. I've never done an exorcism. I've assisted a few times, but never been the exorcist. And so no Catholic priest I know would ever take it upon himself, well, I think I'll just do this without a bishop's permission, because then you're kind of on your own. Yeah. If I'm doing it through obedience to the bishop, okay, I've got the weight of the church behind me, and again, that demon's going to lose this battle because it's not me, it's the church, and I'm doing it out of obedience. Once I'm in rebellion against my bishop, okay, now I'm on the devil's turf, so I don't know any priest would do that. And if you want me to mention, it mentions 3 signs of possession. Yes. Is this a point to mention that right now?
Yes, that would be great.
Interesting, like I said, 1614, and it's a real mistake for anyone to think, oh, well, back then they just didn't know, that some of that could be psychological. Well, they certainly did know. They also knew it was still difficult to sort out, and here's a line from the rite of exorcism. The exorcist should not believe too readily that a person is possessed by an evil spirit. He ought to ascertain the signs by which a person possessed can be distinguished from one who is suffering from melancholy or some other illness. Melancholia, from Latin melancholia, kind of a word just meaning, mental illness. Mm-hmm. So what are those signs? The Rite says 3 of them. Ability to speak with some facility in a strange tongue or to understand it when spoken by another. So if I start going through the ritual in Latin and this person were to start spouting Latin in return to me, that might be kind of scary. You might think, whoa, do they know Latin? Now you'd have to be careful. What if they did learn some Latin, So you don't want to jump to a conclusion, but that's one sign if they're understanding or speaking a language that they should not know. Sign number 2, the faculty of divulging future and hidden events. I think that one seems to be the clearest. Some exorcists have said that, like, the person starts telling them, whatever, something they did in 5th grade or something in their past that there's no way this human being would know. So that can be a pretty clear sign. 3rd sign, display of powers beyond the subject's age and natural condition. That one I think is tricky. Exorcists often say, well, they usually see great strength in a possessed person. But like I said, I'm a hospital chaplain, and our hospital has a mental health unit. Anyone who's worked in an emergency room for some years or worked in a mental health unit knows how strong even a small person can seem to be when, A, they're not in their right mind, and B, they don't care about their own safety or that of others. They can, it can take a number of people to hold down even a small person. So got to be leery of saying, oh gosh, they must be possessed, when poor person might just be really out of their right mind. But so those are the 3 signs. So those are pretty dramatic. I think it's those lower level demon attacks, when someone is thinks they're seeing and hearing and having nightmares about demons. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Those are the hard ones to sort out. These more drastic cases that cannot be explained by science. You got a person who knows what I did in my past and starts spouting, a language they shouldn't know. That can be pretty clear cut.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when an exorcist performs an exorcism, is there anything that the exorcist does to guard themselves from the demonic that they're engaging with? Yeah,
I think Malachi Martin, to go back to his book, which he's a great storyteller, but exorcists would generally say he over-dramatized the danger to the exorcist there. Mm-hmm. But here again, I'll read. This is the exorcism rite. It's got a set of instructions at the beginning of it. So it says here that the priest who's expressly authorized by his bishop to do the exorcism, he must be properly distinguished for his piety, prudence, and integrity of life. He should fulfill this devout undertaking in all constancy and humility, being utterly immune to any striving for human aggrandizement, and relying not on his own power but on divine power. So that's a neat little introduction. So the bishop should make sure that he's picking a priest who, like it says here, piety, prudence, integrity of life, humility, not doing it for aggrandizement. So those are the things. The priests that I know that do exorcism, they make sure they go to confession beforehand, and they'll do fast, mm-hmm. pray and fast, like Jesus said about prayer and fasting. So they'll do that before they do an exorcism as well.
Excellent. And again, I want to remind the listeners, the book is Demons, Deliverance, and Discernment, Separating Fact from Fiction About the Spirit World by Father Mike Driscoll. And Father Driscoll is here with us this week. Can you talk about other types of maybe Catholic and Protestant deliverance ministries? What sort of concerns would an exorcist have with these methods of deliverance?
There you'd get a difference of opinion amongst Catholic ones. The Catholic Church does not, I've been quoting you from the ritual, the rite of exorcism, RITE, the exorcism ritual. We don't have a ritual for so-called deliverance, meaning for something that's less than possession. So some priests will say, well, I have a deliverance ministry for people who have demonic problems that fall short of possession, but they still got some demonic problem. Okay, if I'm talking to or if someone's telling me about that, I'm kind of wondering, okay, and what are they doing there? If they say, well, this priest is saying, has a few people and they're going to pray for this person and they do it quietly and, privately, oh, that sounds great. Fine. to pull that phrase out of exorcism ritual, human aggrandizement and lack of humility, when I see that kind of thing being publicized and a priest or a non-priest, whatever, getting crowds of people to come on a repeated basis, boy, I get all kinds of alarms in my head going off. Like, what's this about? Why do you need all that? Why not just get a few people and do this privately and pray quietly and ask God to protect this person from demons? Why do you need to publicize it and have a big crowd? So that's my distinction. Not all would agree with that, and some would say, that I'm off on that, or that I don't know. But that's my take on it. Some exorcists would agree with that. Some would say those bigger gatherings are okay to have people come and be there together for it.
I would tend to agree with what you wrote, because one of the things that you said was, and I'm paraphrasing, but I think this is true of all Christianity, is recognizing how powerful God is as opposed to how powerful you are. Making sure that you have God's blessing to do something, rather than thinking of yourself as, for lack of a better term, your own God. In other words, taking center stage over God, essentially.
And I don't want to, I'm probably dancing around that, because I don't want to accuse, including priests who I've known who have had this type of ministry. I think they would say they're not doing it out of pride, and they're in fact wanting people to come to be freed of whatever problems, whether demonic or whatever non-demonic. But it just doesn't sit right with me why those things can't be done more quietly, or like Catholics, we have the Mass. Well, there's a certain Mass that can be said for those who are sick. Well, then do that for a healing, rather than. I just, Jesus, remember how Jesus pulled aside people when he was going to do a miraculous healing?
Right.
Later on in the Gospels, it got too difficult. There were crowds around him all the time, but when he could, he likes to do it. He liked to pull people aside. As a Catholic, I believe we've had a number of saints who not all saints had this gift of doing miracles, but some did. None of them publicized, that they were going to do it on a certain place and time. So that those just make me uneasy, and not to judge that everyone who's doing that is prideful, but I'm just uneasy with it, and I just would rather see it done quietly, again, following the example of Jesus.
Yeah, at the least, there's probably a temptation there. And one thing you said that is so true is Jesus, even when he healed people, at least through part of his ministry, he told them, don't tell anybody. Unfortunately, it was so miraculous that they had to tell everybody, but, that's another story. But
that's a great point, because I think he was giving an example, and again, Catholic saints who seem to have had a power to do miraculous cures followed that. They kept it quiet as they possibly could. Some of them got to be well known for it too.
Can a Christian go too far in studying demonology that it would cause them to be oppressed? And if that is the case, if it is, how much should the average Christian, I should say, know about the demonic?
Yeah, you've asked me the ultimate tough question, because I feel like in a certain way I'm writing a book and then going to kind of saying, and after you read this one, don't read any more on the topic, which isn't really fair. But I'm tired of the topic. I did my doctoral dissertation kind of on the same topic. That one leaned more toward mental health, because that was what my degree was in, counseling, and so the book leans more towards the theology and the faith aspect. But I like to think I'm pretty much done with the topic. If I were to write another book, I'd like to do something maybe on scripture, or I'd like to write one on forgiveness. That's a tough topic. Yeah. But I guess I just have to say, personally for me, I don't want to do more with that topic, and I don't think I want to read too much more on it. I think I know as much as I need to. So anyone could, I would say, kind of follow that, learn what you think you need to know, and it's good to know it's out there. But Christians, our faith is centered on Jesus Christ. Yeah. The devil is kind of a side, a corollary to that. He's the enemy, sure, but we don't want to have that battle as the center of our life. We want to have love of Jesus Christ as the center of our faith.
Absolutely. Now, I hope I've got this right. Is your website, and it may be both, but is it peterinchains.org or is it peterinchains.com?
Well, it's .com, but I realized I had made a mistake somewhere along the way. Unfortunately, .org was still open, so that directs you to .com.
Okay. So
I got lucky.
Yeah,
someone didn't set up a competing Peter and Chains website.
Now, so on your website, peterinchains.com, I found this explanation for one of your books, which I found intriguing. and it said, his book of short stories, meaning Father Driscoll's book of short stories, is entitled The Father Capranica Mysteries, Stories of the Strange and Supernatural. He says the latter book was inspired by the persona and music of Alice Cooper. So the question is, how in the world did Alice Cooper influence your book?
So there's my dark secret, but I put it out on the internet. Well, listening to him, I remember hearing the song, is probably famous, most famous song, School's Out. I think I was 10 or 12 years old, so I remember hearing that on the radio. And just this, this goofy, he'd have a snake, he sang, School's Out, he sang about a black widow spider, he's got a song about a haunted house. Just that creepy and yet kind of goofy persona. I've read some things he said, and he's a strong Christian now too. I don't know what denomination.
Yeah, I don't either.
And something interesting he said that he likes to think he's making it very clear cut right now that of playing maybe an evil character, but making it clear that that's an evil character. That's not me. But he does admit that when he had an alcohol problem, that in his early days, said it wasn't quite so clear. It was a little bit blurry that he was, kind of being the bad boy in that. But I guess just that creepy, kind of funny, kind of creepy persona that he had, and that I listened to his music back when. So the stories I wrote are purely fiction, and I think that's what he would say too. It's like, come on, this is pure fiction. He's not claiming anything is based on a true story that he's doing. So I would say the same about my stories. Those were the breaks I needed from reading and writing about possession and demons. I thought, I need to do something just made up fun, good ghosts and whatever else I include in the stories.
Great. So again,
they're fiction. They're not based on true stories.
Yes. So again, the website for Father Driscoll is peterandchains.com. You can check that out tonight and see what he's got on there. But his newest book is Demons, Deliverance, and Discernment, Separating Fact from Fiction About the Spirit World. Again, it's written by Father Mike Driscoll. And welcome back to the Bruce Collins Show. Joining me right now is a young man who reached out to me recently to come on the show and talk about some things that he believes are very important for the American people to know. And we've disguised his voice because he wanted some anonymity to talk about the things that we're going to talk about this week. So I want to welcome him to the show. Welcome. I don't even know what to call you, but welcome to the program.
Thank you for letting me come on the show.
Well, I'm glad you came on. Now, you had reached out to me a few weeks ago to talk about an experience you had. First of all, tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe your age, as it relates to what actually happened to you.
I'm 17 years old. I'm a senior in high school, and recently I had an internship at a pharmaceutical company in New York. I was allowed certain access to some parts of the building that allowed me to see some experiments going on that I didn't realize were going on there.
And you told me that this pharmaceutical company was actually doing some work with the government. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And actually, the shocking thing was the DNA experiments with animals, human DNA, and insects specifically. I had access to badging that allowed me to facilitate some of the experiments at some of the parts of the building that actually had high security. And I saw some of these ants and crickets and spiders that were being injected with DNA and different types of experimentation going on, stuff that I wasn't even aware of because I'm in high school. I didn't understand the science behind what they were doing. And there were many things that I did not have access to. Mostly what I saw were caged insects and a lot of dialogue. So most of it was based on conversations that I overheard.
I see.
And one day I was in the lab and I was actually bitten by one of the bugs.
Now, did you report that to anyone?
No, I was scared to, and I don't even know. I assumed the bug was part of the experiment, but it was free, and free meaning roaming around.
Right.
It was free in the building, and it bit me. And I noticed I felt funny for a couple of days, and went through almost what felt like a withdrawal period. Fortunately, it was a Friday, and I experienced this over the weekend and didn't have to wasn't in school, so I didn't have to miss any time off. And my body started to change, and I noticed I could do things I couldn't do before.
Well, that's very interesting. So, I actually think you should probably tell somebody that has more, that would be better able to advise you than I can. I'm just a radio host on a small station in Florida, so I'm not really sure that I can help you with that. And also, while I might find this story disturbing, I don't necessarily, it doesn't surprise me, and I don't know legally if there's anything that can be done about that, about experimentations with DNA, behind closed doors. First of all, you haven't even told me what the name of the company is, so it would be hard to verify all of this. Now, so that would be my advice: is to talk to somebody in that area. Have you noticed any long-term effects? Anything now? First of all, how long ago was this?
I was in the program for the first 4 months of my school year, and now that I've graduated, of course, I've probably been away from the program for about 8 months.
And are you still experiencing changes to your body?
I think that the changes that took place are now permanent.
What are you now doing after high school? Do you have any jobs?
No, I'm looking for employment.
What do you like to do?
I'm into taking pictures.
Taking pictures. I don't know how you could turn that into a job, to be honest. What's your name?
I'd prefer not to say my name on the air.
Okay, so can you come up with a name that I can at least call you?
Pete.
Okay, Pete. Okay, so Pete, if you can find that there's no damage and these traits that you've picked up from being bitten by this bug, if you can use them in your favor, you might consider that. One thing about New York lately that I've noticed is there's a lot of crime, and there are people who are starting to become super villains. And you've been bitten by a bug, Pete, and you live in New York City. Have you ever thought about maybe becoming a superhero?
No, I never thought about that, but that's a pretty good idea.
Would your parents be okay with that?
Well, my parents are dead. I live with my aunt and uncle, so
Well, Peter, I want to thank you for sharing this information. As shocking as it is, I'm afraid there's pretty much nothing I can do.
Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. Spins a web, sweet surprise. Catches thieves just like flies. Look out! Here comes the Spider-Man.